So one of the things you're taking into account is the selectivity of the school.
Mm,
So for my students, I label colleges a reach, a target, or a likely. A likely being one that I'm certain they'll be admitted to, a target being one that they're very well lined up for. It will probably happen, but not 100% assured. And then a reach school is one where, the average admitted student might have higher grades and test scores, or it's just a college that's very, very selective. And what's important really is the balance of those schools. So if I have a student that, their favorite school is a likely school for them, they might just apply to a handful of colleges. They might not need to apply to more. But most of the time, my students' favorite colleges are going to be reaches and targets. That's just kind of how it works.
mhm,
And so in that case, I typically recommend at least two likely schools, um, 3 to 5 target schools, and 1 to 3 reach schools is kind of a nice balance. My students don't always listen to that, but that's what I recommend. And then the other piece that comes into that decision outside of the selectivity is how difficult the applications are.
mm,
So certain applications, it's basically checking a box. You've filled out the common application. There's no additional supplemental essay. It's just pretty much that easy. And then other applications might require 4 additional essays or an entirely different application platform. And
mm.
so that comes into play with the number of applications as well.
All right. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Parenting Teens Today. Today, we are very lucky to have a guest talking about the topic that can be a very exciting yet very stressful time for parents and teenagers, but parents as well. A big milestone, the college admissions process. And we have a very highly respected college counselor, Katie Konrad Moore. She has helped over 500 students get placement in schools. She was the 2014 College Wise Counselor of the Year. She runs and leads the office in, is it Bellevue, Washington? Is that correct?
Mhm.
Of college for College Wise. She can throw a mean fastball on the softball field, which I love that. I'm a big baseball fan myself. So,
Nice.
Katie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, we're excited. Like I mentioned, this is a very stressful time for parents, and but I guess you're kind of, you come in and make things a lot easier for the process. So I want to just dive into it. I wanted you to share maybe your college admissions experience, and if did that at all help shape you to your career choice of helping now you're helping teens find their college and their right pick. Just kind of give me that backstory a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I think when I talked to colleagues at CollegeWise, most of us had college admission experiences that we don't want for our students. So, for example, being a softball player, I was a recruited athlete, which was really a fun way to apply to college in a lot of ways. But I ended up only applying to one early decision. What that means is early decision is when you promise a school you'll go there if they admit you.
Mhm.
And so it's a pretty risky play. I would never encourage a student to only apply to one college early decision, especially a relatively selective college like the one I attended, Colgate. Um, and I would never advise a student to go that route. So it all obviously it worked out. Um, but I think um when I look back, I see that my dad really drove the process. He was the person that was helping me email coaches and send letters to coaches. He was the one who had come up with ideas of colleges for me to consider in the first place. And my hope with students is that they can really drive the process, that their parents will let them kind of take the driver's wheel a little more than my dad let me or that I decided to take myself.
Got you. Got you. Interesting. So you mentioned applying. You just applied to one school. Is there like a sweet spot or a sweet number that or does it just kind of depend on a per student basis of how many colleges should they try to be applying towards? Is there a number
Yeah,
in mind? Yeah.
that's such a good question. So typically with my students, we're starting to narrow down their list towards the end of junior year, going into the summer before senior year. And we're taking a couple things into account in terms of the size of the college list. So one of the things you're taking into account is the selectivity of the school.
Mm,
So for my students, I label colleges a reach, a target, or a likely. A likely being one that I'm certain they'll be admitted to, a target being one that they're very well lined up for. It will probably happen, but not 100% assured. And then a reach school is one where, the average admitted student might have higher grades and test scores, or it's just a college that's very, very selective. And what's important really is the balance of those schools. So if I have a student that, their favorite school is a likely school for them, they might just apply to a handful of colleges. They might not need to apply to more. But most of the time, my students' favorite colleges are going to be reaches and targets. That's just kind of how it works.
mhm,
And so in that case, I typically recommend at least two likely schools, um, 3 to 5 target schools, and 1 to 3 reach schools is kind of a nice balance. My students don't always listen to that, but that's what I recommend. And then the other piece that comes into that decision outside of the selectivity is how difficult the applications are.
mm,
So certain applications, it's basically checking a box. You've filled out the common application. There's no additional supplemental essay. It's just pretty much that easy. And then other applications might require 4 additional essays or an entirely different application platform.
mm.
And so that comes into play with the number of applications as well.
Got you. That leads me to my next segue here. So it's been a long time since I went through the college admission process and all, the essays and everything you needed that are, I know every college is a little bit different with their requirements, but what are some major changes you've seen universities start to imply during the admission process? Has there been any big changes or, the way it's done or the different things that they were asking for now? Is there a bit, have you seen a difference and change in that?
Yeah, there have been a lot of changes since the beginning of COVID.
Mm,
During that time, we all know we couldn't get together, and so we couldn't administer tests. We couldn't administer the SAT or ACT. So for
yes.
most colleges, testing became optional for that
Mm,
next class. Um, and I actually thought that. That would stick around a lot longer than it did. So a lot of colleges did keep test optional, and most colleges are test optional now. But there are some schools that are going back to testing, to requiring testing in the last couple of years. Um, it's a mix of colleges. It's not like it's all selective colleges or all non selective colleges. It's a really big mix, some public, some private. And that makes it really confusing for students because typically they have to decide when they're going to test and what tests they're going to take before they know what colleges they're applying to. Most of my students are pretty on top of things. They have a college counselor helping them through it, and they still don't really know their final list until the end of junior year, kind of at the earliest.
mm,
But that's ideally when you would be done with testing. And
gotcha.
so that puts people in a hard position to have to make a choice about testing before they have the full picture. And so I think that out of all of the pieces, that's probably the biggest change. Um, I also see interviews becoming a little less important.
Hmm,
Some colleges that used to offer interviews don't anymore. Um, and I think in terms of like supplemental essays, it's relatively stayed the same. Um, Colleges generally have they generally have one main personal statement that they'll ask for. That's 650 words,
mhm,
with lots of topic options. But basically, the topic is tell us something about yourself is really what they're asking. But
got
then
it.
they have these supplemental essays, and those can be in a couple different camps. One is how would you contribute to our diverse community? So, we're a college with lots of different types of people. What type of person are you? How will that show up in college?
Mm,
One is, what do you want to study here academically? Um, and then the other is, why do you want to go to this college? Um, so those have stayed relatively, colleges will change it year to year.
yeah.
But for the most part, I've been doing this um, over 20 years. And for the most part, those questions are kind of in the um, same ballpark as they were before.
Got it. So on the topic of essays, this is kind of a selfish question I want to ask because I know just the way technology has adapted so much,
Hmm.
especially with AI in the past just 5 years, right?
Yeah,
Not to drop the word AI, but I'm
do it.
curious. Yeah, I'm curious
Well,
because with like services like ChatGPT, I mean, I'm guilty of using it myself, but
yeah,
as a student, right? Like you have to put these essays together. That should be a grueling time. You're really focused on is there a way that colleges now can kind of siphon out and see if this essay has just been completely fabricated? This is a plagiarized material. So they have different methods of that. Because I'm just assuming with it at their fingertips now. I mean, I would be using it too, and so it's
yeah.
just. Do you see it being an issue, or your stance on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think colleges do have ways of determining, they've got their anti AI software. But
Yes, yeah.
problem with that is it's only as current, then AI gets better, right? The thing is that I think that the things that make a good college essay are
Mhm,
impossible to replicate from a computer. Um, so what I mean is, the best essays say something about you specifically and tie that into the school. So if we're using the example of why this school, a
mhm.
kind of standard answer that might not help your chances at all, but probably wouldn't hurt them would be, to talk about the size of the school, the campus, the location. And AI can do that just fine. And so can humans, and but that
Um,
that doesn't really move the needle in your admission decision. The
okay.
best essays are ones that reveal something about yourself and how that connects to the school. So, for example, I have a student that was working on an essay about how she, her best learning environments that she's been in are ones that she could really be hands on.
Mm,
And she talked about how she did the summer program at one of the beaches here in Seattle and educating younger kids about marine life. And then she tied it back into the school and talked about how their hands on philosophy really resonated with her. And to me, that's something, whether or not she uses AI to polish that up,
mhm.
that's coming from her.
Gotcha.
A computer can't just generate that experience, or I mean, it could, but it would be not true.
Yeah.
And so having some help in editing or polishing to me is not a huge issue. Um, but the content has to come from the student. Otherwise, it's not a good essay in the first place.
Got you. So yeah, a mixture of like obviously it's got to come from the heart, the personal touches to it, but then run it through to make sure maybe you fine tune or make yeah, I got that. That's the right way. Use it as like a little slight crutch, right? Don't be so dependent on it.
Yeah. One thing I will say though is there are colleges as a part of their application, they do make you agree that you haven't used AI. So there are some colleges that do that, and you want to be able to check, yes, I have not used AI truthfully there.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. With through college wise, do you help parents kind of steer the path of the student loan process? Because I know that's a big concern with parents. It's a very expensive time. Obviously, if you're not an athlete or you don't have, a scholarship, or I know there's access to grants and all, there's a lot of different ways to earn money. But through college wise, do you give, I guess, kind of student loan advice or kind of have a help for parents that are, this is a main concern for theirs. They don't want to put their child in debt or, severe
Right.
debt.
Right.
And I'm speaking from experience. My sister, she went back to law school later in life, and I know that's a whole other animal. But student loans, they can rip you apart. So, like, do you have any like advice or what kind of approach do you take when you talk to parents about that?
Yeah. So we do have financial aid experts at college wise, as well as counselors that help students develop college lists based on their financial preference. So, our financial aid advisors can help parents figure out um, basically what they can afford, so that they can tell us, the counselors, here's what we can and want to pay for.
Got it.
I think the biggest advice that I would give in terms of financial aid and paying for college is that I think the sticker price isn't always going to be the price, and you don't have to pay sticker price if you don't want to. That's not to say that you can always negotiate a cheaper deal or anything like that with a particular college,
Mhm.
but you can usually find a less selective college that costs less because colleges practice something called pref- uh, preferential packaging,
Mm,
and so they'll give better scholarships and grants and loans to students that they want more.
mm,
And so one of the best ways, especially if you're a family who might not qualify for a lot of need-based financial aid, one of the best ways to increase your um, the money that you would get to college is not applying to a ton of outside scholarships or anything like that, but actually being really smart about the schools you apply to and making sure that those are targets or likely schools for you. And those colleges are really generous with aid because those schools are going to be the ones that are most likely to give you money for college. Um, and I don't know, in my experience, I don't know that I've seen that the highly selective colleges show that much better of outcomes, especially for students that aren't in the first in their family to go to college, and especially those that are really well supported at home. I think they do just as well at some of the like mid-level rated colleges than the top tier ones.
gotcha. Got you. Okay. Thanks for sharing that. So I know you mentioned earlier about your dad being in your corner big time when he was looking for colleges for
Yeah.
you and a big support system. I don't know if I misheard you, but did you say you wished you put more time yourself into that process? Is that something you mentioned earlier? You wish you kind of took the lead on that or
Yeah, I do. I think, I just trusted him and he is a very trustworthy person.
right?
But instead of thinking that I should have any opinions about it, he had gone to college, he had gotten graduate degrees, so he must know what
Mm,
he's talking about. But students know themselves best, and um, I think that I wasn't aware how different colleges can be from one another.
mhm,
I figured that they were kind of all relatively similar. And they're really not. I mean, an experience at even at two schools that are really close by, like in my neighborhood, University of Washington versus Seattle U,
mhm,
totally different size, totally different educational philosophy, um, different neighborhoods, different types of people. And when I say different types of people, that filters down to like different conversations in the cafeteria, different clothing. Like people look different when you walk around campus, people are wearing different things.
mhm.
And I think those pieces are really important in determining whether a student's going to fit in and have a good educational experience there as well. And so I wish I had paid more attention to that and done a little bit of my own college research as well. I got lucky and Colgate ended up being a really good fit for me and I really liked it. But that was luck more than design.
Gotcha. So what would be like you were mentioning, I mean, when teens they're about to go to college, they're getting that whole new source of independence, right? They're going to be going out in the world on their own and making their own big life decisions. So
Hmm.
how do you encourage the students to kind of, like you said, take the lead and but also keep their parents in the loop? But ultimately, this is their decision. This is where they want to go, where they're
Right,
trying to take their life, right? And I mean, they may not even know. I know I didn't know what I wanted to do when I got to college until my second, even maybe my third year in, right? So
right,
it takes time. It's a process. But what would you like? What would be your piece of advice for teens to, like I said, take that lead, take to go for it, but also, your parents are in your corner too, and you want to keep them in the loop. What's like a way to find that
right.
balance the best way?
Honestly, I think that is probably 80% of the reason that folks hire me
Mm,
is because they know that I will keep their kid on track and their kid will be focused. And so they don't have to fight about it themselves. And the kid doesn't have to, hear nagging from their parents and they can enjoy their last year of high school with their parents. This is often the last year that they'll be at home, and that's a really, really special time. There are lots of exciting things that happen from prom to graduation.
yeah.
And um, I love that when I work with a student, the parents can then let go and let the student move forward, making their own decisions, knowing that there's guardrails there.
Mm,
Because I'm going to let the parents know if things have gone off the rails, if the student's not completing their assignments, if the student is um, making poor decisions, right? I'm going to let the parent know. And so I think that's if you can have another supportive adult expert in your corner, that's a real help in that way.
do you have like a success story? I mean, you've had so many different students, you've helped so many. I'm sure you have a lot of great success stories, but do you have any one in particular in mind that maybe you had a student come to you, maybe they were even unsure about even wanting to continue and go to college, but maybe you were able to turn their perspective around and get them on a path. Do you have any like cool stories, like anything like that on the top of your head that you could share with a specific student?
Yeah, I love hearing that question because I think so many people, when they ask about success stories,
Mm,
they really want me to talk about the student that I had that went to MIT last year, or 2 years ago, the computer scientist at Stanford. And those students totally deserve lots of praise, and what a great experience for them. Went well. But my favorite students to work with are students with a lower GPA, because often I get to be the person that tells them that they can go to college. I think a lot of times when students say that they don't know if they want to go to college, what they're really saying is, I don't know if I can get in. And I don't want to be embarrassed here.
mhm,
Right. So I worked with a student, gosh, it was probably 4 years ago, who um, was really surly. He was just like your classic surly teenager. In the first
mm,
meeting with his mom, he rolled his eyes the entire meeting. His mom was like mortified. I can't believe he's behaving like this. And I'm like, well, it's a teenager. That's fine with me. Um, and then um, for the following meeting, she let him come on his own. And what I realized is that really tough exterior was hiding this worry that he wasn't going to get into college, and that it was going to be, and that maybe he was stupid. Um, and I remember when I saw his SAT scores for the first time, he had a pretty low GPA. It started with a 2. Um, but his test scores were relatively solid. He had a 1200 on the SAT, which is comparatively, higher. And I remember saying to him, like, "Oh, okay, so you can't pretend like you're not smart. Like, you have a pretty good SAT score." And I still remember, like, he got so red, like the tips of his ears turned red. Um, but I could see that it made him happy to hear that he was smart. And I was like, "You put on this projection of not being smart, but like you're going to be able to hack it in college." And so once he started believing that, it
mhm,
was amazing what he was willing to do. So this is a kid who his mom said was the biggest procrastinator in the world. And he was finished with applications before at least half of my students because he was so focused on the prize. He's like, okay, if I can do this, I'm going to do it. Um, and uh, it was so exciting to see a kid like that turn around from being kind of like disengaged to
mhm.
actually get excited about the process and submitting the applications, and hearing back good news. He got plenty of good news, because he focused on colleges that were likely to accept him or kind of target range, um, and um, and went great for him and great for me too. It was really fun to see it.
Awesome. Because yeah, you're not just helping steer the pathway, you're also kind of getting them focused and believing in themselves too. Because like you
Right,
said, you
right,
it's it takes a village of people, right? To like, sometimes they don't may not want to hear it from their parents, but then they hear it
right.
from an outside source like you, and they're like as your mentor essentially, right? And that's really powerful. That's really cool. That's an awesome story. I love that, and I feel you would just get a lot more out of something like a story like that, a student like that who, like you said, was struggling, maybe didn't believe, maybe they felt stupid, but you're like, hey, no, there's a lot of colleges that would accept you, and
Yep,
if you look at your scores, you actually aren't doing that bad,
right.
pat
You're
yourself on the back. You're
yeah,
okay, like, give
exactly.
yourself some grace here, you know? No,
Yeah.
I love that. That's really cool. That's an awesome story. And so you're a mother yourself, right?
Yeah, I have a 12-year-old.
12-year-old. So I wanted to ask
But she acts
you.
like she is 15, so I think I do have some experience with teenagers.
Gotcha. So do you have, as a mom, you're a college counselor, obviously, have you are you I mean, I know she's got some time still,
Mhm.
but is there anything or any kind of like goals or things that you want to do for her to get in place when she's in the
Yeah,
high school level? What are some of those things? Like as a parent, let's just say you're a concerned parent. Your kid's a sophomore, junior, or freshman, whatever, in high school. They still have a few years left. But what are some steps that parents can take to get their teen in the right mindset to want to go to college, to plan, to get some goals? What are just some, I guess, like a blueprint of some advice you would
yeah.
give?
So I think the first piece is to, and this has been easy because college is a big part of my world, but um it- make it a college rich environment around you. Talk about
Yeah.
where people went to college. Oh, our dentist. Did you know he went to Washington State? You
Mm,
know, do you know where that is? Do you know their mascot? Talk about college. If you're vacationing, see what colleges you can visit, not these high pressure, like, what do you think of the college? Did you like it? Asking the student to assess it, but just, hey, I wanted to take a look at it. Can we drive through and see what the campus looks like? Oh, this is a bigger campus than was my college experience. What do you think about it? So just try to expose them to colleges early. I think the more colleges students know, the more they can identify where they are in the um, in the mix of things. So for example, I talked about Seattle University versus University of Washington. And just having my daughter walk around Seattle U, she talks about the neighborhood. Oh, this neighborhood is so cool. It's in this neighborhood called Capitol Hill. Um, and it's really vibrant. It's right on a light rail stop. And so she's starting to think, okay, I think I want to be in a city. And that might change over time, but that's something that she's picking up on now. And then um, I think the two other pieces, one is to be um, go alongside your kid with this journey. Don't push them on the journey. Like it's one of those things where you kind of have to cheer them on from the sidelines. You're not usually, as a parent, the best person to help them with this process.
mm,
Um, I will not be brainstorming my daughter's essays. I will not be reviewing her applications. That is not what I see as my job. I don't think it's best for parents to do that because they're too close to the source. And the way I always say it is like, when you have a kid, you have seen their entire life. And you know that they were so scared about preschool when they were 2. They were really shy, but they overcame it. You saw their first crush and how obvious they were about it. You saw when they tried an oyster for the first time. And so you see the whole story, whereas they see that who they are now. So their life is a loaf of bread, and you see the entire thing where they see the slice. And that's really what the application should be. Like, the essay should be a slice of their life now. It
mm,
shouldn't be this story about who they've been since they were a baby. That's your story as the parent, right? So their story is always going to be different than yours. And I think the best way to deal with that is let it be theirs.
mhm,
Um, and then the last thing, um, One of the things I've found is that the more my students are surrounded by people who are different from them in their schools, in their teams, in their social environments,
Mhm.
the more they're able to identify who they are. So my students that go to really, really diverse schools are able to say, like, I'm privileged, or they're able to say, this is an identity that's unique to me. They're able to talk about themselves in a way that students who are in more environments like that are similar to that student, um, they're able to talk about it in a way that's beyond um, students who don't grow up with that difference. And so, as much as possible, surrounding your kid with different stories, so they know all the possibilities and kind of start to identify who they are and all of that.
I love all that. I really love your approach too on it. I mean, they're borderline. They're about to be adults, right? Or they are technically are adults, 18,
Yeah.
right? So you don't need to be standing over their shoulder and be too controlling. This is something they need to take on. They need to take responsibility for. And by letting them do that and passing them the torch, essentially, like, hey, this is your life. You need to take focus. I think that's so important. And so I love that you kind of, like you mentioned, I'm not going to be helping my daughter with her essays. I'm not going to be reading them over. I'm going to let them do what they think is best and let them spread their wings. And just like you mentioned, going on those campus tours are like those are the most fun. I remember when I was
Hmm.
going through that process, you're like, "Oh my god, like I'm gonna be able to live here by myself. Like this is such
Yes.
like you said, this is such a cool neighborhood, or this is wow, I could live here." Like you just it kind of puts it in perspective and in reality. And I think
Yeah.
once you start doing those tours, it really just makes it more exciting, makes it an exciting experience. So
Right.
that yeah, I could completely agree with you that getting your students the experience to go do tours, do it. That's such an important process, part of the process. So got one more question for you and then we'll get
Yeah.
you out of here. We always like to ask our guests on the show here. It's kind of a funny question, but if you were to go back to, let's just say, your let's just put it in the college perspective. Usually we say when you're a young teenager, like 13, but if you could go back to senior year Katie and you could stand in front of yourself now with what you know, you obviously you're the college admissions guru now. What would be one piece of advice or kind of word of wisdom you would give to the younger self, your younger self?
Yeah. What a good question. I need to listen back to some of the previous answers for some inspiration.
You've probably
Um,
mentioned a lot of stuff already, but just it
yeah.
could be a quick little, just little
Yeah.
piece of wisdom.
I think I would tell her to be brave. There is nothing that can prepare you for all of the absolutely awful and challenging and beautiful and delightful moments that come in adulthood. And there's no way you can prepare for that. So just approach it with curiosity and bravery and openness. And I like to think for the most part I did. So,
Let's go.
yeah.
I love that. That was a great answer. I love it. Well, Katie, thank you so much. I really appreciate your
Thank
time. I
you.
think where can people parents find is it just collegewise.com or is there a specific place people can find more information to hire your services or just to work with you? Where can they find
Yeah.
you?
It's collegebias.com, and we have a ton of webinars on lots of different topics. So we've got webinars for seniors on working on the application process right now. We have webinars about paying for college or how to best do college visits. We have a really, really solid stack of those. So that's what I would suggest to start with. And our website has a list of all our counselors, including me, and that's where you can get our contact information.
Love it. Katie, awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. I think parents are going to get a lot of valuable information. Maybe they can breathe a little easier now.
Good.
It's going to be
Yeah.
okay. You have
Yeah.
help.
Yeah.
So thank you again so much for your time and
Thank you for
sharing
having me.
everything. Of course,
Yeah.
of course. That's it. Let's get out of here. Thank you again.
Bye.
All right.